So what we're seeing right now is certainly not normal for Microsoft, and that could mean a few things. When you just say Microsoft in gaming, you can go, yeah, there's a lot of stuff that's technically not normal with them, especially with their dedicated hardware and their console, where you have a console, but you're not necessarily supporting it with exclusive games. That's really a practice that's worked. It's stood the test of time. Nintendo does incredibly well with that idea, and it's something that's translating well for them to the Switch, and I'm sure to the next generation. Sony continues to roll along with the PS5, and while they're doing late ports to PC, they seem to still be sticking to the idea of software sells hardware. Microsoft, though, is going a different direction. They are basically going full multi-platform, it feels like now, and turning into more of just an overall publisher that happens to also have a console. Well, something else that's not normal technically here is the amount of software that Microsoft is looking to deliver in 2025. I've sort of discussed the idea that Microsoft could move to try to be the biggest publisher in gaming. Well, just based on the way things are shaping up for them in this year and then maybe in the following 2026, 2027, seems like they're getting closer and closer to that goal very, very quickly. I'm going to go over that here today. So if you guys enjoy this video, make sure you hit that like button. Subscribe if you're new. Now, as I mentioned, Microsoft, they do a lot of weird stuff, especially recently. And go back a year ago, Phil Spencer saying 4 games would be making the jump to different platforms. And now we're seeing just about everything. In fact, they're to the point where they'll just randomly in a week announce Forza Horizon 5 is going to PlayStation 5. And that is a highly successful, well-rated game that was just on Xbox. And I think it's going to do very well on PS5. But then you also see games that just are starting to have the PlayStation logo during these Xbox developer directs, which we just recently saw that whole thing transpire. But with Microsoft and them really focusing in more and more on software, they seem to be getting to a point that they've been discussing, attempting to get to for years now. And that's having that one big game per quarter. Now they're almost moving to one game, and I'm not kidding, it's this close, per month. I mean, let's just take a look here. This is a roadmap that's been updated consistently by Clobrel over on Twitter X, and they recently updated it again after that developer direct. And we could see with the green bar here starting in 2025, we have Avowed, which just came out, and you know, I've been playing some Avowed. I've played like 5 hours of it so far at the time of this recording. It's a fun game. I think it's like it's fine. It's not groundbreaking. It's not like overpowering, over the top. Like, how are they doing this kind of stuff? But it's just a fun game. It's a good first-person action RPG. So I'm going through it. It's very streamlined. You feel like you're getting a lot done from minute to minute, and the exploration's been pretty good as well. So I'm still rolling through it again. 5 hours. I still have I think quite a bit more in front of me for it. So at least at this point, I'm not disinterested in it. But going from there, Towerborn, South of Midnight, Doom: The Dark Ages, and when you round out the Doom: The Dark Ages, that basically runs us up through May. There's a few games that are not on here, and there's also a few on here that people are like questioning a little bit, which I can try to explain here a bit. So I think the way Microsoft is looking at the Xbox is it's a gateway to Game Pass, and it's the only console technically that has that subscription service attached to it. Nintendo doesn't have it on their Switch, or seemingly Switch 2. Sony doesn't have it on their PlayStation 5. You can get it on PC, of course, but most likely you're running Windows on that PC for Game Pass, so Microsoft is fine either way there. And maybe that's how they're trying to treat their console right now. It's ease of use, easy barrier of entry, especially with how PC gaming is just getting more and more expensive for the hardware. You buy the console, you sign up for Game Pass, and boom, you have a large slate of games you can jump into immediately and plenty to look forward to. So when I hear things like Ninja Gaiden 2 Black is going into Game Pass day one, I mean, that might be something I'd put on here and be like, look, it's a Game Pass title that went in that was a big release. I mean, day one shadow drop into the service. Kind of the same thing with Clair Obscur. That has been, Microsoft's definitely been taking more and more notice of that game, and they did show it at the developer direct. It is going to Game Pass day one. So that's another thing. It's kind of there to bridge the gap you would usually look at between releases. But now it's getting to the point where there are so many games coming out that Microsoft just has them there. Like the bridging the gap for them right now is like, how do we get from the beginning of a month to like the third week? oh, okay, we'll throw Clair Obscura in there, and then here comes South of Midnight, like right there, right close to each other. So going from that to Doom the Dark Ages, that would technically round out through May. From there, they have Ninja Gaiden 4 on here. Ninja Gaiden 4 seems to be this weird, confusing thing to people. Microsoft is publishing it. They don't own Ninja Gaiden, the intellectual property, but technically they'd own the rights for release of Ninja Gaiden 4, as even talked about that by like Platinum Games and Koei Tecmo, that Phil Spencer was the one that got everyone together and, yes, wrote the check to get Ninja Gaiden 4 rolling along, and that is coming out at the end of this year, and once again, going into Game Pass day one. Outer Worlds 2 does have a 2025 release on it, and I do want to mention this. Obsidian has probably been, I mean, you can make the case that it has been Microsoft's best acquisition. Certainly when it comes down to how much it cost versus what they're producing since then. I mean, it was like right around the time of Outer Worlds, right? That it happened. So that's almost 6 years ago now. And they have produced consistently. So in, let's say Outer Worlds 2 does come out, I'm thinking second half of this year, like a fall release, that'll be 5 games in 6 years. That's pretty impressive. And I know some games are like Pentiment. That's not a huge game. It's a small team that put that together, really, and the scope fairly limited. But it's still a game that actually did pretty well, critical acclaim, and people seem to, who did play it, seemed to get a kick out of it. They also did Grounded, which was, once again, smaller scope, small team, but the return on it's been seemingly great. I mean, if you look at it, they announced last year that they've had 20 million people play that game. And yes, it's on Game Pass, but otherwise, you're also buying it on other platforms, like on the Switch, on the PlayStation, on Steam. So I feel like that one definitely got quite a bit in terms of the return on investment there. But the thing is, Microsoft needs a good release cadence from studios. Obsidian seems to be delivering just based on their output at this time. You can argue back and forth on if releases are good or not. It does appear that even a game like Avowed, which is going through it right now online, is, even if it's just average, we'll say, that's kind of what they're trying to get out there, are games that are different from one another. Pentiment to Avowed to Grounded to Outer Worlds 2 coming up here, that can work to add variety and, again, a release cadence, filling up a calendar for Game Pass. So I think Obsidian in general has been one of the best acquisitions that Microsoft has made at this point. Now, the other thing we have to remember with Microsoft is because they are relying on their subscription service, they can do things like shadow drop games, as we just mentioned with Ninja Gaiden 2 Black. It appears another game is coming up here with I think it's going to be a short announcement to release. Now, there are 2 games that I think are going to be coming out this year that technically haven't been announced yet. But let's take a look at the first one. And yes, that's Tony Hawk Pro Skater 3+4. This is over on the Tony Hawk The Game website. It stops you as soon as you go to it with a countdown to March 4th, or 3+4, of course. Yeah, that appears to be getting announced here in a couple of weeks, and it's been rumored quite a bit. Tony Hawk himself has certainly wanted to say this for a while. Pro Skaters have mentioned it. So we're not too far off, at least from the announcement. And it wouldn't shock me if we're a few months away from this game coming out. I was actually looking at the schedule. I'm thinking, I guess June? That would make sense. That's sort of where we are. It's like they're filling up all, like, the first 6 months of the year already with these releases, to where that would make the most sense, I guess, for it. Now, it could also be later in the year, and maybe it's like a July or August game or something for the second half. But again, I wouldn't be shocked if once this gets announced 3 months later, Tony Hawk Pro Skater 3 and 4 come out. So that's be pretty exciting. Iron Galaxy, by the way, appears to be the studio working on it. It's not Vicarious Visions or Blizzard Albany, as they were moved to. So interesting to bring Iron Galaxy in on that one, and that's apparently been worked on for a few years now, kind of in secret. I don't know. Again, it was a poorly kept secret, is what it seemed like, because everyone, I think, wanted to say, hey guys, Tony Hawk Pro Skater, it's not dead yet. Now, the other game that hasn't been announced yet, but has been rumored for a bit, is that Oblivion remake. And yeah, I think that's actually getting announced probably at that June showcase that they typically have, the E3, not E3 show from Microsoft. And I think that one will also come out relatively quickly after that. That's the thing we're going to see from Microsoft. Announcement to release in just a few months for a lot of these games going into their Game Pass subscription. And yes, also it does help Microsoft in that sense that they're working away from physical games, I think, faster than any of the big three right now. And that does help them when it comes to release cadence and getting games out very quickly after release, because there's just less logistics in the background to get these games on store shelves. Even Nintendo has technically done this, where they would shadow drop Metroid Prime Remastered and then put it in stores times like a month or two later. Also, don't forget, Microsoft is most likely going to have several games that have not yet been announced for PlayStation 5 and Switch 2. Master Chief Collection, that seems to be one. A Gears Collection is another. And there have already been discussions of Hellblade 2 making the jump to PlayStation 5 at any point in time. As in, I think that's going to be when we wake up one day and they just announce it right there on Twitter. So while those aren't necessarily new announcements, like brand new games coming out, I mean, it's worked well for PlayStation moving games to PC. And I do think that PlayStation 5 audience will be very receptive to many of these games. When Halo Master Chief Collection gets announced for Switch 2 and PlayStation 5, that's going to print money for Microsoft. I think they'll do very, very well on either storefront there. Call of Duty, I mean, you can set your watch to that. That'll be out end of October, November, somewhere in there. There's always the chance that you could have a surprise for something like Gears of War E-Day coming out this year, or who knows, maybe even Fable? And that's what I mean. 2025 currently for Microsoft is shaping up to be massive, and I do think they're going to have, again, it sounds crazy, 12 to 13 notable games that they put out this year. Technically, more than one per month, which is way far ahead of the one per quarter they were looking for with notable or larger games. I think they'll definitely have 5 or 6 large games here for 2025. But while we've talked a lot about the strange stuff happening at Microsoft in the background as to how they approach selling their console, or even not selling their console at this point, where their focus is, one thing's for sure, they're definitely generating games consistently. And right now in 2025, it seems like in terms of the big three, they're going to be the one probably putting out the most games. And that's going to be very interesting when we get towards the end of this year, looking back on it, exactly how much they were actually able to deliver. But let me know what you guys think about this one down below. With Microsoft's roadmap in front of us for 2025, getting started here with Avowed and having the Game Pass drop with Ninja Gaiden 2 Black. What else are you looking forward to this year, and what other surprises do you think they could have up their sleeves? Thanks, guys, for watching, and I'll see you next time.